We begin with our top story tonight. Well, the head of state and government marks exactly 1 year since he ascended to the highest office in the land. His first budget may have finally received the nod of approval, but the Finance Act 2023 is not without challenges. Lack of adequate public participation, for example, sidelining the Senate and the Ministry of Labor from the process of consideration of the Bill 2023 are some of the reasons that have been given by at least 11 petitioners who want the three-judge bench to repeal the act in totality, completely, throw it away. Our reporter Brenda Zeda, who sat for the 6-hour court session, kicks off our broadcast tonight. All right, now that story is coming to you shortly. The court sat for 6 hours to deliberate. Remember, this case was suspended, was expelled, was taken out of circulation, was suspended, and later on the court gave it reprieve. And now the case has begun. Brenda Zeda sat through the 6 hours and now reports.
2 months after the Court of Appeal lifted the suspension of the implementation of the controversial Finance Act 2023. The hearing of petitions filed by various groups and persons and responses from various government entities and the National Assembly began Wednesday morning at the Milimani Law Court Room number 18. 4 hours, the 11 petitioners, through their advocates, argued their case on why the court should declare the enacted controversial Finance Bill 2023 null and void.
The fact that this matter is prosecuted by very, very eminent lawyers who also happen to be members of parliament should tell all of us something. It is not a legal dispute. It is a political and policy dispute.
If the Appropriations Act only has expenditure, where are the revenues in law? Why are there no revenues in law? And what happened to the revenue, the document titled Revenue Estimate of Revenues, although it was not in the format that the law prescribes, what happened to that document?
Issues touching on adequate public participation and whether the voices of Kenyans were captured during the tabling of the Finance Bill on the floor of the National Assembly dominated the court session. The petitioners also questioned the parameters used by Parliament when collecting views from various stakeholders and thus failed to meet the constitutional set standard of public participation.
Parliament was supposed to make a law on public participation. There was a bill of 2019, and unfortunately, when Parliament adjourned, it collapsed that and has not yet been introduced. So, my lord, the country is yet to have a law on public participation, but there is sufficient guideline in the Constitution.
And where two Kenyans submit new proposals at that late stage, it is not fair for Parliament to choose to treat one of them differently from the other. So all the stakeholders who submitted new proposals at that late stage were entitled to be treated equally.
The petitioners told the Justice David Majanja-led bench that when the act was introduced on the floor of the National Assembly, there were amendments introduced that were not subjected to public participation. According to Busia Senator Okiya Omtatah, who is also one of the petitioners in the case, argued that the Senate was sidelined in some key sections that deserved the inputs of the upper house.
Since the estimates submitted under Article 221 contain estimates of revenue of expenditure of the Chapter 15 entities, it naturally follows that the procedure under Article 221 must be read with Article 249 Clause 3, and that would ensure that as per constitutional edict, the budget must be considered by both houses.
Any law that has provisions touching on a function that the fourth schedule has reserved for county governments must be considered by the two houses.
The precise functions Senate is now asking for are the precise functions we gave it in the Boma's draft. And it is the very functions that Parliament, the National Assembly, removed So the history of this constitution confirms that there was no role under the constitution as drafted.
The housing levy was another issue that the petitioners poked holes into on grounds that it violated the Employment Act, lack of enough public participation, and further questioned why the Ministry of Labour was not involved in its implementation.
The authority to make rules and any instrument worth calling itself a statutory instrument under the Employment Act is within the domain of the Cabinet Secretary in charge of labour matters.
When the bill was published, the rate was 6%. Eventually, the Act is settled at 3%. So that tells you that there was form of public participation for that rate to change from 6% to 3%.
Brenda Zeda Radido, KTN News.
Right, that case proceeds. President